really our pleasure to meet you and to talk about a subject which really everybody is interested in, but unfortunately, very few people can talk authentically on this subject. And we are actually fortunate to have you because I know you for so many years, and I know about your commitment and your deep interest in the study of psychology and parapsychology and all shades of psychology. And therefore, we cannot get a better person than you to ask some basic questions, which many people, many of our readers, I'm sure, will also be having. So let us now talk about parapsychology. What is this parapsychology? We all know about psychology. We know some little bit about parapsychology, but I would like to know what is parapsychology, how is it different from psychology, and is there a basis, a scientific basis, or a rational thinking behind that? Can you please enlighten us?
Parapsychology is actually older than academic psychology, formal academic psychology. Originally, it was called psychical research. Then the term parapsychology was coined to bring it under psychology. So today, parapsychology is a branch of psychology. It is accepted as a branch of psychology in most places where psychology is taught, or in places where there is psychological research.
So in India also there are institutions which are specializing or which are doing good work in parapsychology.
Parapsychology is not taught at basic levels of psychology, but it is a research area. There are research projects in many universities. For example, Bangalore NIMHANS, they used to do research on parapsychology. Andhra University has a department of psychology and parapsychology. Rajasthan University had 2 lecturers working in this area. In Kerala University, there has been an optional subject called parapsychology right from the very beginning of the department.
Okay. For post-graduation.
Post-graduation. Okay. Master's level.
But when you talk about parapsychology, some people have a mental block. They put a block of cynicism or sort of a irrationality attached to that. So especially in Kerala, I mean, we are for various reasons we are supposed to be a rationality oriented society, and therefore parapsychology for many people is probably outside the psychology framework, or maybe at best at the fringe of psychology framework. So what do you think about this view?
My own opinion is that parapsychology is at the very base of psychology, because the father of psychology is Freud. Freud himself was interested in psychical things. He has written papers on telepathy, and towards the end of his life, he was invited to be the president of a society for psychical research. He declined the invitation, but in the letter in which he declined the offer, he said that if he is at the beginning of his career, he would choose no other subject other than parapsychology.
Why you think he told like that? What could have been the reason why he?
Because initially, when Freud encountered telepathy in his handling patients, he was embarrassed. So he had a private meeting which discussed the occult significance of dreams, because he encountered telepathy in his interaction with patients and their dreams. And they didn't publish the results of this discussion until about 20 years later.
Oh.
So he got more and more evidence of telepathy. So finally he wrote this paper on telepathy. And Jung was his disciple. And Jung was psychic from the very beginning. And Jung gave some demonstrations before Freud, which convinced Freud that these things are real. psychokinesis and things like that.
Shall I ask you one question? Since you mentioned about Freud and Jung and you use the word psychic, so it really interests me. I'm asking a question. Maybe it is outright irrational, but I just want to ask you. Now, when we talk about people with divine powers, we without taking any specific name, sometimes some of these people, many of the divine people, they one of the means through which they sort of establish their divinity or supremacy was through miracles, doing miracles. So even Christ has done miracles, or so many other people have done miracles. Now, what is the miracle part of this faith? Is it uh, based on this psychic power? What you talked about?
Yes, psychic only means sensitive. A highly sensitive person can probably transcend the sensory motor limitations of ordinary human beings.
So that is why they say, that I don't know. See, recently I read a book by Sri M. You know Sri M, no? He's from Thiruvananthapuram. So Sri M, he spent a lot of time in Himalayan caves and interacted with a lot of yogis and who do meditation there. And he has written that many of these people who do meditation away from human habitation and all, they have psychic powers. They, as you said, they have telepathic powers. They have power to know what is in the mind of somebody else without that person speaking. Now this is all there. So that means some people are able to transcend the limitations of normal psychology and go beyond this. And this is what probably we normally say that they have psychic powers. So how is it that some people have this and some people don't have it? What is it? Why?
The understanding in parapsychology is that we all have these powers. Only thing is that it is not in our control ordinarily. The so-called occult masters are those who have been able to gain some mastery over these things. Most human beings may have occasional experiences related to the paranormal. For example, at the time of a crisis, the son is in America, father is here. Father has a heart attack, and then the son suddenly feels that something is wrong at home, so he telephones. So this kind of thing happens for many people.
Okay, so see this instance what you mentioned. Now this doesn't happen for all sons and all fathers. It happens for some sons and some fathers. Yes. So why is it? Is it because of the intimacy or the closeness of the psychological closeness of the two people that it happens for some people, or is there any other reason or what?
Psychological closeness is one factor. Another factor is similarity in mind. People who are having a similar mental makeup tend to have more telepathy than others. Usually, fathers and sons may share some kind of mental similarity, and that's why it happens.
Is it purely mental, or it has to do with some genetic aspects also? Because father and son, there may be some genetic compatibility also.
Both are related. The genetic similarity is one basis for other kinds of similarity.
Okay. Now, this again, Professor, it brings me to another instance. For example, I have heard that when there are twins, for example, there are two twins, one is in Trivandrum, other is in Bangalore, and they are both working, they are settled. But when one gets sick, the other person feels uneasy. So, this many people, with twin children, they told me, I don't know whether it is fantasy or whether it is true, but more than one parent couple told me that they have twins, and when one gets sick, the other feels uneasy, even though they are physically at different places. Is it?
It has been experimentally corroborated. There have been many parapsychological investigations using identical twins. So they have found that telepathy is greater among twins than among other people, ordinary siblings, for example.
Okay. So it has something to do with the genetic connection.
Mental similarity.
Mental similarity. Okay. So, so in your opinion, parapsychology is, can be literally considered as an extension of the psychology, the body of psychological knowledge, right? Psychological knowledge. Okay, fine. Now, this brings us to another interesting thing that, especially in the rural areas and in our traditional society, there are many people who believe in spirits, ghosts, and afterlife and things like that. So when somebody dies, what happens to the spirit? What happens to his soul, his spirit? Now, does it suddenly stop existing, or does it transform in some way, or what happens?
And this brings us to the question of what we are now. Are we a closed system? Are we just a product of this body? Is our mind an epiphenomenon, a product of the physiology? Or is it the other way around? There is a conscious reality which expresses itself through the material body. So this is a philosophical question, and we can debate on this for hours. But parapsychology is open to the idea that there may be a conscious reality which expresses through the body. And even after the body dies, there can be some kind of continued existence of the spirit. It may be a field of consciousness, a certain vibrational complex.
Does it subside, or does it transform, or does it transfix, or does it what happens to it?
There are different possibilities, and actually the evidence seems to indicate that everybody does not have the same kind of survival. For more ordinary people, it may be just that the total field survives, and there can be re-expressions of the total field.
Through what?
Through different bodies.
Oh, I see. So that means you are now, what you are saying is bringing me to this question. So is there something called as possessing, like somebody is being possessed by somebody? For example, we go to temples like Chotanikara. You go to Chotanikara, you will find that a lot of people come there, especially mostly young girls are brought there, and these girls, they through their expressions they give an impression that their bodies are possessed by some souls, and then probably through some ritualistic action, this they calm down. Now I have seen also this happening. It may be, but for my rational mind, it is more of a illusion or hallucination. But I don't know, from psychological perspective, how do you do this?
Obviously, it has something to do with a kind of hysterical dissociation. These girls are experiencing some kind of emotional release by this kind of dance or this kind of exhibitionism. But also, when a person is in an emotional stress, there can also be a paranormal involvement in the sense of they're showing some indications of possessing knowledge which they ordinarily do not have, and things like that.
Yeah, because I've heard that for example, many years back when I was in Bombay, we had a neighbor, a child. That girl the parents were from UP, so they were speaking Hindi normally at home. But certain occasions, she used to speak in Assamese or Bengali language, and after that particular period of that possessive expression, she comes back to normal. This I have seen, but I don't know why this happens. Maybe it's illusion, maybe it is hallucination, maybe it is, I don't know, fantasy. Why it happens? It is a small child. The child was only 3-4 years old.
Now, was she speaking genuine Bengali or just a few Bengali words?
few Bengali words, but in a cohesive manner, making sense.
Oh, I see.
For example, "Ami tumake bhalopasa" means I love you. Something like that. She says, "Amar badi Kolkata te achi." My house is in Calcutta. So she speaks correct, grammatically correct Bengali. But other times, if you ask her, she doesn't know. So how do you explain this from psychology?
There are different explanations. One explanation is that she has some kind of contact with a person who is alive now and who is able to speak Bengali. Or maybe she is contacting the memory of a person who lived in the past and who could speak Bengali. Of course, our first explanation involves reincarnation. The idea that she was a Bengali in her previous life, assuming that there is a previous life, and that she is able to recall what language she spoke in a previous life. So there are different possible explanations.
But as a professor of psychology and with your long years of research and reading and expertise, would you say categorically that there is nothing called reincarnation, nothing called rebirth? It doesn't make scientific sense. Would you make the statement?
I have spent some 2 weeks discussing this with the Tibetan lamas in Dharmashala. And the Tibetan people take reincarnation very seriously. When a lama dies, he says, I will be reborn in a particular place at a particular time. So these people go there, identify the new child, then put him to severe tests, like identifying correctly objects which the previous lama used and all that. And they themselves say that all people do not reincarnate like this. A person who dies can be reborn as another person. It is not that one person is reborn as another person. A very highly developed lama can will that he will be reborn as one particular person. That's a rare thing.
So what you are saying is very interesting. What you are saying is that when you reach a certain level of psychological power, you can at will reincarnate either as one or as many.
Ordinarily, there is re-expression of karma, not that a person is reborn. But in the case of a highly integrated person, he can will that he will be reborn as one.
This brings us to the other question what you mentioned about karma. Now, we talked about reincarnation, we talked about rebirth, we talked about continuity of soul and spirit, etc. And now since you mentioned the word karma, now is there such a thing called karma? And is there such a thing that we have to bear the results of our karma of the past? I mean, is it something that religion has ordered just to make you disciplined and follow the routines, or is it really having a scientific basis?
Both are possibilities. My own feeling is that in the physical realm, there is what is known as action and reaction. It is a physical law, we know that. So it is possible that in the psychological realm also there is such a thing. It is not that somebody sits somewhere and punishes you or rewards you for your behavior. It's not that. It is that the theory is that everything is an expression of consciousness. So you are also an expression of consciousness, and when you do a certain act, there is a reaction on yourself. So that is what is meant by karma. It is not that somebody makes a judgment and does something to you.
But why is it that, what is the motivation for many people nowadays? If you look around in the society, many people knowingly that what they are doing is wrong or unethical or, it is bordering on even criminality. Many people go ahead and do it for getting pecuniary or financial benefits. knowing fully well that I mean, at least some of them may be knowing, or in their subconscious mind they'll be thinking that there is something called karma. I'll have to bear the fruit of what I'm doing, but still, for the moment, let me get the money and forget it. So why people have this motivation in spite of such a Damocles sword hanging on your head that you will have to incur the consequences of this, but still, why people do it? What is the motivation?
Now, some new religion called Satanism is spreading. Even in Trivandrum, it is spreading. Many young people are going after it. Actually, many of the followers are staunch Catholics, and they have got very rigid beliefs. So I asked some of these people who came to me, do you believe that there's heaven and hell? Of course I do. Then I ask, then why is it that you are following Satanism? Then the fellow says, if I do something for Satan, immediately I get the reward. Ultimately, I may go to hell, but who cares?
Correct. You're right, because now this is the time, this is the age of instantaneous reward. You want immediate reward.
Exactly.
Okay, God will give me reward later. This guy will give me now. So let me take it.
I'm interested in the girl next door. If I pray to Christ, he will not give me the girl next door.
If I pray to God, the girl will go to somebody else. But if it will Satan, I will get the girl tomorrow. So, okay. So now let us. Let us now look at extrasensory powers. Now, this is very interesting. Again, that we already covered it in the example you told about twins acting similarly, etc. But what is the basis of these extrasensory powers being shown by some people? I mean, can it be cultivated through training, or it comes naturally to some people, or it is a passing phase for some people in some phase of some stage of their life? Extrasensory power, is it something to be acquired? Is it something which can be acquired through training or developed through training? How is it?
Actually, there have been many kinds of efforts trying to develop these extrasensory capacities in people. And most of these experiments have shown that there's some initial success, but in the long run, this doesn't work. In the long run, actually, these powers decrease by training rather than increase. And then the final conclusion is that these extrasensory capacities are a function of the total personality. For example, one finding which has been repeatedly obtained through research is that artistic people have more psi, or this psi capacity. So, can you develop your musical aptitude through training? You may be able to improve your performance through training, but the innate capacity cannot be developed easily. It is a function of your whole personality.
So what you're saying is, it is to a certain extent, it is inborn.
To a certain extent, it is inborn, and it is a question of can you become a saint through training. So when you transcend your body identification, and when your mind dissolves into pure consciousness, that is the situation where you get access to these psi capacities. Or that is the time when psi capacities come under your full control.
So you are. So can I say that? I mean, your view is that extrasensory powers are something which are connected to the universality, or the broad nature of the self, the soul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But why some people show that and some people don't demonstrate is because of what?
There's evolution. There's mental and spiritual evolution.
Evolution means, does it mean that it is because of the inhibition that some people suppress these things, and because they think that you have to conform to the norms of society, so you don't want to show this, so you become more like others. You want to be more like a clone rather than being yourself. I think those who have less inhibitions, they may not have that restriction, and they may show spontaneously what is in them. Is it correct?
And that is one aspect of the whole process, I suppose, of transcendence. So we are rigidly fixed to the material reality. Some people are more flexible and they can to some extent transcend this.
So this, if in a house, in a poor middle class house, there is a girl, a teenage girl who is showing, some, shall I say, I mean, in the normal understanding, aberration of behavior, and the parents get worried, and they have two options: either they can take her to a psychiatrist, or they can take her to somebody who will heal spiritually or through these other methods. Now, in many cases, people opt the second path. I don't know why. Maybe because of lack of awareness or education or whatever. But still, many people take the second path, and some of them probably get result, or I don't know what happens. But should there be a governmental diktat or a rule saying that no, these things this is not the way. If there is something, just like you feel bad, you go to a doctor. You feel something is wrong, go to a qualified, trained psychiatrist or a psychologist. Don't go to these healers. So can it be controlled through some governmental interference and make people more rational? Is it possible?
This is a very hot topic of contention now in Kerala. Because some people are trying to get a law passed preventing all these native practitioners of witchcraft and healing and all that. And then they want to ban things like astrology and such indigenous systems. But the point is that in actual science, Western science, a revolution has taken place. In fact, almost every year, people belonging to research fields like medical anthropology come from the West, and the university sends them to me, asking me to help these people. So these people have entirely different orientation now. They think that all these primitive societies have indigenous methods which are very effective in handling psychological problems in their society. That is why these methods have survived the test of time. And they think that the key to survival as a species lies with these people rather than with the Western society. Because the Western society is getting disintegrated. People are getting divorced, children are becoming destitute, drug abuse, all kinds of immorality, high school girls giving birth to children. Every high school has attached a nursery, and the children are abandoned. Crime is on the increase. While these primitive societies appear to be very stable, they have stood the test of time. And mental illness is on the rise. And it's been shown that there's a high correlation between degree of urbanization and degree of schizophrenia. And these primitive societies do not have any mental health problems. The really primitive societies. The crime rate is very, very low. So they think that if we want to survive as a species, we must go back to their way of life. We're living close to nature, being content with what nature gives, rather than have a technologically sophisticated kind of life.
So, are you saying that Western society has now provided a scientific basis or a framework for this parapsychology aspects of.
No, I'm not equating parapsychology with the shamanistic practices. But what I'm saying is that there may be some psychological or even parapsychological principle involved in their practices. Because there was a medical anthropologist by name Murphy Halliburton, who came from America, and he did 3 years research here. So I was helping him. So he compared Ayurveda, religious therapy, and other forms of native healing of mental illness compared to modern psychiatry. And his thesis is available, anybody can see it. You just type Murphy Halliburton and you will get the result. It is in a website called ResearchGate. ResearchGate. So his finding is that the results show that the rate of success is the same for psychiatry as well as these traditional practices. And patients express more satisfaction with the traditional native forms of treatment rather than with modern psychiatry.
Is it because native way is less invasive?
That's right.
You mentioned about the certain deterioration in the quality of life and relationships, etc. In the Western society. Now, if you take Kerala, just you take Kerala, and you take last 1 year's newspapers, you find whatever you describe as France, it is happening right in Kerala. Living together, extramarital childbirth, single mothers, everything. Probably we have not had so many cases of same-sex marriage and all, but up to that we have come. So there is. See, the thing is, why is that in Kerala society some of these things, so-called aberrations, which are getting noticed now, they are already there in the Western society. So my way of looking at it is, which you may agree or disagree, is that that this is the result of the opportunity to express individuality. This is here there is more opportunity to express your individual differences because the society has shed many of its inhibitions. For example, the way a transgender is treated in Kerala and the way a transgender is treated in UP or Bihar is a lot different. It's a lot different. So maybe we have that in our social consciousness there is more inclusiveness, more openness, more individuality. That is why some of the so-called aberrations in the West are getting replicated here. I mean, this is one view. I would like to see your perspective on it.
There are different reasons why this is happening. One reason is that we are imitating the West. Second reason is that certain social changes are taking place. For example, women are going for employment. In traditional society, women used to remain at home. So women have financial independence now. So we cannot resist these changes because we have accepted the equality of the sexes, which is again a modern point of view.
So is it a social progress or a regression?
Now many Western sociologists think that it is a regression. We are going back to primitive or even earlier than that. We are degrading ourselves. And we cannot survive as a species if we continue like this. Everything may blow up in a third world war. So that is the cost of our material progress.
Okay. So the fact is that we are moving away from the conventional way of behavior, social behavior, and because of that, the current behavioral pattern is different from the past. Whether we say it is good or bad, but it is different. Yeah. Okay. Now this brings us to the other question about superstition. Why some people become superstitious? Now, when I talk about superstition, one example is Sachin Tendulkar. Whenever he was a very accomplished batsman, but before he went to bat in crucial matches, he has given in an interview that he used to wear a particular type of undergarment because that with that undergarment he used to score century. Now you see, and he also said that I would ask my mother not to watch the match over TV because whenever she watches, I get out before scoring 100. Now, this sort of things, how do you, why so-called intelligent people, why they behave like that? There are many like that, many people. Why?
Basically, I suppose it is because of insecurity. A person who is generally insecure or insecure in a particular area tends to become rigid. And this rigidity expresses itself in many ways, like, for example, obsessive behavior, like wearing a particular underwear or holding to a particular religious belief, going to a particular temple or praying to a particular deity, or wearing a talisman. So this somehow gives them a support, a psychological confidence. But if they don't need such support, then they don't need to have such rigid compulsions.
Is it just a reinforcement? For example, he had some successful experience in the past while wearing that particular thing or doing that behavior. So it is to reinforce his confidence that he is doing it.
It might have been just a coincidence. He performed well when he was wearing a particular underwear, and so he thought that there is a connection between the two.
But would you say that it is, like when you evolve, your personality evolves, you should come out of this, or it doesn't matter if that helps you to be a better performer, so be it. What do you think?
If he has real confidence, then he will not depend on such things. All good performers may not need such support.
But is it inherently wrong to have such beliefs? That's the question.
It is a handicap, I suppose, having such beliefs. For example, I know that there is a very good singer, Malayalam film singer. She is terribly afraid of giving stage performances. She is an excellent singer, but there are instances where she just would play pre-recorded thing and just show her lip movement.
Oh.
She is such a good singer.
Is it because of superstition?
She lacks confidence.
Not because of superstition.
Maybe she has some stage fright also.
But I was reading somewhere that some psychological research show that superstition actually reinforces your confidence in some cases. So it is okay. You need not outrightly condemn it. Would you support that?
Yes. But I suppose if you have real confidence, then you don't need such supports. It is only the below top level performer who needs such support.
Okay. Now, sir, brings us to another interesting subject which you mentioned also earlier about astrology. Now, in Kerala, you go to any nook and corner, there is an astrologer, and when it is marriage season, parents will run to some astrologer with the horoscope of the bride and the bridegroom and ask them to match. Now, are these not totally irrational, unscientific, primitive, or does it serve any psychological purpose, positive purpose of matching horoscope and after getting some astrologer to talk you up in your confidence? I don't know. Is there a positive aspect of this? All these things.
Yes, the positive aspect is fear control. That is, the marriage is a very serious business, and it involves considerable risk. Nowadays, you don't know anything about the boy or girl. In the olden times, if you knew that this fellow is from a particular family, you know that his behavior will be like this. In modern times, you can never know. The fellow may be a drug addict or he may be an alcoholic. You may not know. So there's considerable risk. So you become more and more tense uh, as the discussion proceeds. So you need somebody to give you confidence. So you trust the.
But this is the question: why do people trust such people? Because I mean, the parents who are going there also, some of them are scientists, some of them are PhD holders, doctors, but they go and sit before somebody who is just a quack, half baked expert, so called expert. How do such educated people believe it?
Actually, I have some astrologers who are friends, my friends, and I know for sure that this astrological consultation, particularly with regard to marriage, serves a very definite purpose. Somebody brings a marriage proposal, and it may be from a person who is known to you. And then you cannot outright say that your son is an idiot, I don't want him as son-in-law. But you can very confidently say, our astrologer says that the horoscopes do not match. That is an acceptable excuse. So you don't have to become enemies. You can reject a proposal very easily by this excuse. And the astrologer, clever astrologer, will see that you really do not want this match, and he will invent some excuse. You will say that though there are 9 there is one very, very important puritam which says that this should not take place. So you can say that.
So that is, yes, that is of course a fallout, a good fallout. But other than that, this. But what do you think now? Is this dependence on this astrologer and horoscope matching? All these things are increasing or getting reduced, or what is the current?
I think it is getting reduced because of the simple reason that more and more young people would marry a person of their own choice rather than a proposal which comes through an intermediary. Well, now more and more boys and girls are refusing to marry a person whom they do not know personally.
And when they know personally, also they say, "I know personally, so it's not the person for me." So after knowing well,
yes, that also happens.
So from a behavioral perspective, from a psychological perspective, there is no scientific basis for horoscope matching.
The scientific basis is that it provides to take it, and it gives a basis for taking a decision where you don't want something to happen. It's a good excuse. It's a good cover.
So it will continue.
It will continue.
Whether we like it or not. So now this, the last question that I have is about this Vastu, because whenever people want to build a house, they will say, I'll bring some Vastu expert and he says it should be here, the kitchen should be there, house should face that side, window should be here, that should be there. Now, is there, all these things are very, from a psychological perspective, behavioral perspective, or scientific basis, is there any sense in all these things? Or whenever, if you have a plot of land, okay, if you can only build a house facing south or north, it doesn't matter. You can only do that way. So why do people still, now I find more and more people are getting interested in Vastu, and so why, is there any science in this?
Yes, there is certainly a science in this. Because South Indian Vastu is different from North Indian Vastu. South Indian Vastu is based on our environmental conditions and climate and all that. One very good example is that there shouldn't be a water body, a well, in the southwest corner, which is called a Kanyamal.
Why?
That's because most of the time we have strong winds from the southwestern side. This is the monsoon, southwest monsoon. So if you have a well there, water body there, water source there, naturally in the olden times the kitchen also will be there, and all the smoke from the kitchen will blow inside the entire house. So in order to prevent that, they have given this rigid rule. Now the point is whether in a modern house which doesn't have fire for cooking, whether this has any relevance. So in the olden times, they formulated certain rules without mentioning the real operating factor behind it. So in North India, they have a different set of rules because their climatic conditions are different. And nowadays, more and more people are going after Vastu because again of the insecurity factor. A person can build only one house in his lifetime and he doesn't want something to go wrong. So the Vastu person gives some confidence. This is correct according to Vastu, you can build this. So it is a clear calculation in the projects.
You know what? I've seen some people after building a house, then they'll say, I consulted some Vastu expert. He said that actually my main door should be not this way, it should be the other way. So then they block that main door and then they open up another door in some other direction. Now, this is also because they don't have, they probably they had some bad experience and they want to sort of get back their confidence, so they are finding some excuse.
Usually, people do not accept the blame for some mishap, and they want to put the blame on something else. See, a fellow does several businesses, and all of them end in failure. So he doesn't want to say that I am a fool. So that's why my businesses didn't succeed. But instead of that, he will look around and find an excuse that there's something wrong with the house. And then the Vastu expert will come and say, you are correct, there's something wrong with the Vastu. So he will say, demolish this wall and build the wall over there. So the fellow is happy. It was not my fault, it was the fault of the house.
But then his next business he should do well.
Then next business also fails, he will say that Vastu man was not good. He will call another Vastu fellow. And this goes on.
So, what would you, what is your message to there are a lot of young people. I was reading somewhere that young people, well off, well settled, having good jobs in IT and other areas, and they also now believe in more and more in superstition and is these sort of restrictive practices. So, what is your message to youngsters? How to cultivate rationality and scientific temper, and how they can move as far as possible away and to a more pragmatic approach towards this superstition and these sort of irrational beliefs.
My advice is that they should keep an open mind. They should understand what is behind the traditional beliefs and practices and not follow them rigidly. Understand the underlying principles and use it intelligently. For example, this Vastu business, its real basis lies in our climate. And when we are building a modern house, which doesn't involve cooking with firewood, then does this apply. So you understand things by going to the roots and not following something blindly and rigidly.
Okay, final question, sir. What is the concept of God? I mean, should you be God fearing or can you be agnostic?
You can be agnostic or even a skeptic, but being a rigid materialist is unscientific. because science is always open-minded and progressive. So it is best to remain flexible and keep an open mind. And instead of blindly believing or disbelieving, try to understand what is represented by the concept of God. Perhaps there is an awareness principle in the whole of existence, which underlies the material reality that we experience.
So you can be scientifically oriented and still you can believe in a God, in a supreme being, some power which will help you to calm your nerves. Is what you're saying?
Yes. Science was not created by any one person. Somebody did not write, this is science, you must believe this, you must not believe this. Science was created by people like Sir Isaac Newton and Einstein in physics, Charles Darwin in biology, and so on. And all these people who created science were believers in God. So obviously there is nothing against believing God in science. A scientist can fully believe in God, but not in a rigid religious God, but in an open-minded awareness as the basis of all existence.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for enlightening us on a whole range of topics. I'm sure our readers will also find a lot of insights into these very sensitive subjects. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.